called this part 2 of this series, two-part series. I've called the talk Elias the Artist, Christian Rosicross appears. I should also add to that that Shakespeare also appears, which is what I'm going to talk about, to start with at any rate. So in the first part of this two-part series, I sketched out the background to the forming of the Society of the Golden and Rosy Cross in 1570, and then the start of its preparatory work in 1572, when the supernova in Cassiopeia appeared, confirming to them what they had to do. Then I talked about the importance of the Bacon brothers, Francis and Anthony, how Francis had the great vision of his life's work whilst the Cassiopeian supernova blazed away, following which he was sent to France from the Queen's hand, where he had a book bound and printed for him with the first Rosicrucian AA Gemini headpiece on it. And once Francis was back in England in 1579, the AA Gemini headpiece, or with them separated as an AA headpiece and a Gemini headpiece, started to appear on many publications as a Rosicrucian signature. Then in January 1592, Anthony Bacon returned from his 12 years on the continent, acting as an intelligencer and diplomat, to join his brother Francis and begin their Gemini work together. Now the Gemini are known in mythology as swans, because they're children of Leda and the Swan, but they're also known as spear shakers. This is something that many people don't know. Then later that year, in November-December 1592, twin novas appeared in Cassiopeia, confirming the start of their Gemini work. And the very next year, Shakespeare was born. A birth, that is, of the name of William Shakespeare, as printed on the Shakespeare works. So now I'm going to share my screen. On April the 18th, 1593, the narrative poem Venus and Adonis was entered into the Stationers' Register. And this was the first publication that carried the name William Shakespeare, but printed on the dedication page, not the title page, and with the AA headpiece above the dedication. And in the dedication, the author says that it was the first heir of my invention. So clearly the registration date, followed by publication, was intended to make the link with St. George's Day, 23rd of April, so that Shakespeare could be said to have been born on St. George's Day, and the Rosicrucian link made clear. For St. George is the Rosicross knight, who, metaphorically, shakes his spear of light at all dragons of ignorance and vice. St. George's helmet is a golden helmet, as is the helmet given by Pallas Athena, the 10th muse, to her knight heroes. The name William is from German Wilhelm, meaning golden helmet. The following year, the narrative poem The Rape of Lucrece was published, also with the Shakespeare name printed on the dedication page. It was registered on the 9th of May, 1594. And these two narrative poems, published on 2 consecutive years, act as twins, announcing the Gemini theme. Each poem involves an immortal and a mortal, a goddess and human male in Venus and Adonis, and a king and his female subject in Lucrece, because kings were considered to be gods on earth. Moreover, the immortal and mortal roles are the reverse of each other, and their major theme is of lust rather than love. Lust of a goddess for a man, and the lust of a king for his female subject. And both poems end in the suicidal death of the one who is lusted after. In this way, the greater theme of the whole Shakespeare canon is introduced, which could be summed up as how to transform lust into love. For it is lust for sex, for another person, for power over others, for property, for land, for wealth, even for killing, that is the primary problem that humanity has, and which always leaves harm, death, and destruction in its wake, and solves nothing. But love, on the other hand, transforms everything into something good and beneficial, brings illumination, and can create a paradisical golden age of happiness. The dedication pages have, in fact, a double signature, whilst at the same time emphasizing the number 2. For instance, the name William Shakespeare is printed on the dedication page of each poem, which is the second page of the quarto. The title page is the first page. Moreover, the dedication page of Venus and Adonis is headed by an AA headpiece, whereas the dedication page to Lucrece is not. And the text of each dedication is printed in a different font, Venus and Adonis in italics, and Lucrece in normal font. This helps emphasize that one twin is immortal, the other mortal. That's to say there are 2 William Shakespeares. But then even the 2 William Shakespeares are twinned. And this twinning is depicted in historiated capital letters that begin each dedication. The R beginning the Venus and Adonis dedication, and the T beginning the Lucrece dedication. The R signifies rose, and the T is a Tau cross, the 2 together forming a Rosicross signature. Now, in April 1594, Anthony Bacon moved to a house in Bishopsgate Street, which was almost next door to the Bull Inn, where plays were performed that attracted the fashionable men about town, such as the Earl of Essex. I'm pointing to the area now. That's the Bull Inn I'm pointing to. It was also within easy reach of Shoreditch, where James Burbage's 2 playhouses, the Theatre and the Curtain, were located, and which had just reopened after being closed during the 1592-3 because of the plague. The theatres are just out of this picture above here. Now, at that time, Will Shakespeare was one of the actors in James Burbage's company, whilst Edward Burbage, son of William Burbage of Pinner Park, was one of Antony's servants. And William Burbage was well known to the Shakespeares of Stratford-upon-Avon, having been engaged in a dispute with John Shakespeare, Will's father, over a house in Stratford-upon-Avon. Anthony Bacon's house was also near to Crosby Hall, which had at one time been the home of Sir Thomas More and the meeting place of the English Magian Society. So I'm pointing to that now. In 1594, however, it became the home of the wealthy alderman John Spencer, Lord Mayor of London, who also owned Canonbury Manor. Both these mansion houses became the meeting places of the accepted or speculative Freemasons, who formed an inner core within craft Freemasonry. Essentially, this inner core of accepted Freemasons were comprised of the members of the Magian Society, who in 1570 had adopted the name Society of the Golden and Rosy Cross. Then in October 1595, at the invitation of Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex, Anthony Bacon moved into Essex House. I'm pointing to Essex House now on the map. And here it is again. Essex House was previously known as Leicester House, when the Earl of Leicester occupied it, and before that it was called Paget House. And the house is built on the site of the Outer Temple, which was 1/3 part of the temple headquarters of the Knights Templar. The other 2 parts are the Middle Temple and Inner Temple, which became Inns of Court for lawyers. The Knights Templar deliberately positioned their headquarters on the riverside and the boundary between Westminster and the City of London. And the gateway called Temple Bar was built across the road on the north side of Middle Temple, with the Strand on the Westminster side and Fleet Street on the City side. There's Temple Bar, there's Fleet Street and the Strand. And that's the Middle Temple, that's the Inner Temple. And you see how easily they communicate with each other. That's a picture of the Temple Bar. The Templars and then the lawyers were called upon to act as gatekeepers, that is, guardians and mediators between the government in Westminster and the people in the city. And this idea of twinship is built into the English Constitution. The government cannot govern without the people's consent, and the people have to obey the laws that the government passes. The legal system makes sure that both happens. The Inns of Court were also twinned, Gray's Inn with Inner Temple and Lincoln's Inn with Middle Temple, thereby making 2 Inns of Court outside the temple and 2 Inns of Court within the temple. And this is in fact a full Gemini effect, as Leda, in the Leda and Swan myth, gave birth to 2 sets of twins, one set immortal, the other set mortal. The fulfillment of their destiny is that both sets become immortal mortals. But this is only achieved by means of love, friendship, and effort. Now, in Essex House, Anthony headed a team of intelligencers working with agents abroad, gathering intelligence of all kinds to assist Francis with his plays, as well as to inform the Queen, but this time informing the Queen via Essex rather than Burleigh. And Francis, meanwhile, headed a team of poets, writers, translators, and amanuenses, that means scribes and secretaries, working from Gray's Inn or Twickenham Park Lodge. And both Francis and Anthony were poets and Kabbalists. But whereas Francis was also a philosopher, lawyer, and the Queen's counsel, Anthony was also a diplomat and intelligencer. They supported each other in this way. And it was Essex House. Essex House became the focus and meeting place for what I call the Shakespeare Circle, composed of the patrons and chief poets of the Shakespeare works, just as it had been the meeting place of the English Areopagus of poets in Leicester's time. Now in 1600, a new star, a nova, in Cygnus the Swan, was first sighted by Willem Janszoon Blur, a Dutch astronomer, mathematician, and globe maker. In that same year, on 10th of March 1600, Essex, who had been Lord Lieutenant of the English forces in Ireland, but who had returned from Ireland in 1599 contrary to the Queen's orders, was placed under house arrest, whilst the Queen and her council contemplated what to do with him. The same day, but just before Essex's house arrest, Lady Leicester, Lord and Lady Southampton, Sir Fulk Greville, and Anthony Bacon were ordered by the Queen to quit Essex House, where they had been residing. Almost a year later, on 19th of February 1601, after an attempted uprising in Westminster and the City of London, Essex was tried on charges of treason, found guilty, and on the 25th of February 1601, beheaded on Tower Green in the Tower of London. 3 months later, in May 1601, Anthony Bacon mysteriously died, with his body being, to quote, buried in a chamber within the vault, end of quote, of St. Olaf's Church on 17th of May 1601, according to the church register. I mean, this was first discovered by Daphne Maurier, which she writes about in her book Golden Lads. But I've also been to check it. Now, as a result of Anthony's death, Francis Bacon inherited Gorhambury. And the very next year, on 20th November 1602, Lady Anne Bacon surrendered to Francis her life interest in the manors and estates of Gorhambury, to quote, in consideration of the natural love and affection, end quote, which she bore him. She carried on living there, but her mind was failing with her advancing years, and she became, to quote, little better than frantic in her old age, end quote, according to Godfrey Goodman, Bishop of Gloucester. Now, Lady Anne eventually died in August 1610, enabling Francis to take over the house completely and introduce his new ideas, which included a new mansion near the river called Verulam House, pond yards to the north of Verulam House, and a pyramidal mound with a temple on top, known as Bacon's Observatory, on the high ground in Pray Wood. So there's Verulam House I'm pointing to now, pond yards just north of it. Bacon's Mount is here on the high ground in Pray Wood. And that's, it's called Bacon's Mount here, but it had a temple on top and he called it Bacon's Observatory. So Bacon's Observatory, now known as Bacon's Mound, as the temple is missing, acted as the centre of a vast and meaningful geometric pattern that Francis laid out across the estate, which I shall say more about later. On the 24th of March 1603, Queen Elizabeth died. On 25th of July 1603, King James VI of Scotland was crowned King James I of England. And it was in this way that England and Scotland became united under one crown, the two together being called Great Britain. Great Britain. This joining together of the two countries was akin to what is known as the mystical marriage, which is another feature of the Gemini story, wherein the mortal, male or female, marries the immortal, male or female. A new beginning now beckoned, and this was almost immediately proclaimed by the stars. In December 1603, a great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter occurred in the zodiac fire sign of Sagittarius the Archer. So I'm pointing to that now. Moreover, as seen from the Earth, The 1603 Great Conjunction occurred within the Milky Way, close to the galactic heart. At the same time, the new star or nova in Cygnus the Swan was still shining brightly. So there's the star in Cygnus the Swan and the supernova at the Great Conjunction. The new star in Cygnus the Swan was seen as being highly significant, not only because of what the swan means, but also because in 1603, the swan was perceived as flying along the Milky Way in the direction of where the Great Conjunction was occurring. So the swan was acting like a pointer to the Great Conjunction and linking the two together. And the swan is associated with Dionysus, who in allegorical myth ascended into heaven to become Cygnus the Swan. And the name Dionysus means son of God. The Thracian poet Orpheus, who is a prophet, high initiate, and reformer of the Dionysian mysteries, was also symbolized as a swan and likened to Dionysus after his resurrection and ascension. Then Jesus Christ, like Orpheus before him, was also symbolized as a swan and called the Son of God, that's to say Dionysus, after his resurrection and ascension. And Cygnus the Swan is also called the Northern Cross. The two names provide a Gemini image, wherein the cross signifies the immortal light of God, and the swan symbolizes the mortal being raised to immortality. And this sarcophagus in Lisbon, which I'm showing you now, portraying Jesus Christ as both the swan and the cross, shows the perfect amalgamation or marriage of the two, of the swan with the cross. As Jesus said, the Father and I are one. Because of Orpheus's ability as a prophet, poet, and musician, and his ability to charm all living things, even stones, with his music and singing, the swan became an emblem of similar great poets. It is for this reason that the poet Shakespeare is referred to by Ben Jonson as the sweet swan of Avon. And Jonson says this in his poetic tribute to the author that is included in the pages prefacing the plays in the Shakespeare Folio. The Rosicrucians had been alerted to the significance of the 1603 Great Conjunction in Sagittarius by the prophecy of Paracelsus, which the new star in Cygnus, the Swan, helped to confirm. 58 years earlier, Paracelsus had foretold the appearance of a marvelous being, a great light, whom he described as Elias the Artist, an adept of chemical science, who would renovate the arts and sciences and reveal many things. And Paracelsus said that the appearance of this great light would be the sign and harbinger of the approaching revolution. And this, he said, would occur 58 years after his own death. And Paracelsus died in 1544, and 58 years after 1544 is 1603, which is when the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the sign of Sagittarius took place. And such conjunctions can be calculated by astronomers, so Paracelsus was certainly aware of this. The fact that Paracelsus also prophesied the appearance of a great light, which he associated with Elias the Artist, means that Paracelsus must have had prophetic vision as to what was to happen at the time of the 1603 Great Conjunction. because in 1604, two other remarkable celestial events occurred. First of all, the planet Mars joined Jupiter and Saturn in close conjunction. There they are there. And secondly, a bright supernova suddenly appeared nearby in the constellation of Ophiuchus. And all this happened whilst the nova in Cygnus was still shining. According to Robert Flood, as published in his Tractatus Apologetica, meaning Treatise on Apologetics, which was published in 1617, the 1604 celestial event was assigned to the Rosicrucian fraternity for them to emerge from their period of secrecy, expand their membership, and begin the restoration of the world. Flood linked the 1604 celestial event with the earlier supernova that had appeared in 1572 in the constellation of Cassiopeia, the Heavenly Queen. The time between the two supernovas being when the Rosicrucian work had been prepared in secret. The Rosicrucian fraternity identified this great light with their father, Christian Rosicross, with the supernova marking the opening of his tomb and start of making the Rosicrucian work public and spreading it across the globe. Moreover, the 1604 supernova in Ophiuchus appeared in the same part of the sky as the planetary conjunction, the part of the sky that is close to the center of the Milky Way galaxy, as observed from Earth. And this is also the area of the sky associated with the cusp of the zodiac signs of Sagittarius and Scorpio, and near to where our midwinter sun appears now on the ecliptic, an event that marks the end of a great age and the beginning of a new great age, an event which is happening right now. And this is something that the Rosicrucians would have known, and makes sense of why they consider the celestial phenomenon so important. The Rosicrucian work was designed to help humanity prepare for the even greater light that would appear when the world was crossing the threshold, leaving behind the old great age and entering the new great age. Now, as Flood hinted, the whole celestial phenomena from 1572 to 1604 was a guiding light to the Rosicrucians, who by the 1590s, if not earlier, were being led by Francis Bacon. Moreover, on Earth, in England, which is Britain, England then included Wales, the landscape zodiac of the country was perceived by the Rosicrucian fraternity as a reflection of what occurred in the sky. In the British landscape zodiac, the corresponding place on Earth to where the 1604 Great Conjunction took place was close to London. London itself marks the ecliptic cusp of Sagittarius Scorpio. And London was the place where the Shakespeare plays were being performed and where the main educational work of the Rosicrucians was being carried out. The 1604 supernova in Ophiuchus corresponds on Earth approximately with Gorhambury and St. Albans. The supernova effectively represented the great light that Paracelsus had foretold, which appeared in the 13th sign, the seat of the heir to the throne. And Gorhambury was indeed the seat of the heir to the throne of England, because by that time Francis Bacon owned the estate. However, he had been denied the throne of England because his natural mother, the Tudor Queen Elizabeth I, had not announced publicly that he was her natural son and heir. The law had been changed by Elizabeth and Leicester so that she could do this if she wanted to, but she didn't. Paracelsus's prophecy concerning the great light that would appear in 1603-4, and which he named as Elias the Artist, clearly referred to a person, the Rosicrucian imperator, Francis Bacon. Moreover, it was Elias the Artist who would be cryptically titled Fra CRC in the Rosicrucian manifestos that were published in Germany a decade later. That this was well known in the secret Rosicrucian societies that flourished then and later, and that they knew who it referred to, is evidenced by various people. For instance, Robert Burton, in his Anatomy of Melancholy, first published in 1621, names Elias the Artist as the Theophrastian master of the Rosicrucian fraternity. Theophrastian master refers to a Paracelsian master, a master soul or magus who had inherited the mantle of Paracelsus, whose real name was Theophrastus von Hohenheim. Paracelsus was known esoterically as the monarch of secrets. And he was taught by Trithemius, the Benedictine abbot of Sponheim in the Rhineland-Palatinate, who also taught Agrippa. Trithemius was renowned as a historian, cryptographer, Kabbalist, and occultist, amongst other things. And in this way, via Paracelsus and Agrippa, the wisdom knowledge of the Magi was transmitted to the English order of the Magi, who then renamed themselves as the Society of the Golden Rosicross in 1570. Robert Burton then continues in his Anatomy of Melancholy by giving strong hints as to who the Theophrastian master is, by referring to him as the instaurator of all arts and sciences, reformer of the world, and now living, i.e. in 1621. And that he, his fraternity, friends, etc., are all betrothed to wisdom. Betrothed to wisdom refers to a philosopher, which is a word meaning lover of wisdom. And the instaurator of all arts and sciences refers to Francis Bacon and his great instauration. Moreover, in 1660, when the Royal Society was founded, Bacon was publicly acknowledged as its instaurator. Then Bacon's titles also give the game away. In 1618, Francis Bacon was created Baron Verulam of Verulam. The of Verulam describes the place that Francis Bacon is Baron of, which is the Roman town of Verulamium, over much of which Gorhambury estate stretched. This is how a normal title is given. The first Verulam, which is an unusual addition, is an adjective describing the Baron, Francis Bacon. And in Latin, verulam means spear shaker. Thus Francis Bacon is titled Spear Shaker of Verulamium. Then, in 1621, Francis Bacon was created Viscount St. Alban. The name is of a person, the Romano-British Saint Alban, not the town St. Albans. If the title had referenced the town of St. Albans, there would be an S after Alban and an of before St. Albans, which there is not. The original St. Alban was known in Freemasonic tradition as the founder and first Grand Master of English, that's to say British, Freemasonry, which was craft Freemasonry. Francis Bacon is the second St. Alban, founder and first Grand Master of speculative Freemasonry. Having been created Viscount St. Alban, almost immediately Bacon was impeached in Parliament, in which he was commanded by the king to plead guilty to the charges against him, even though he was not guilty of any of them. And this was in effect a martyrdom, akin to the martyrdom of the original St. Alban. And 5 years later, on Easter Day, 1626, Francis Bacon died. And a highly cryptic memorial statue of him was erected in St. Michael's Church, St. Albans, where his body was buried in the crypt beneath the chancel. I'm showing you this now. As for the nova in Cygnus, it corresponds in the British landscape zodiac to Stratford-upon-Avon and what is known as the Shakespeare country or Sweet Swan of Avon countryside. Indeed, the Celts and Romans recognized the landscape's correspondence with Cygnus and built their roads and sacred centers accordingly to help define geomantically and geometrically not just one, but two swans in the landscape, Gemini swans. This would not have been unknown to Bacon and the Rosicrucians, hence their choice of the actor William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon as a mask, whose name happened to fit the pseudonym William Shakespeare. The celestial phenomena that took place from 1572 to 1604 seems to have also been a guide to Bacon and the Rosicrucians as to how to sow their seeds of wisdom in the world for future generations to come. So I'm showing you all these things from 1572, the 1592 supernova and the two novas in Cassiopeia, and then the nova in Cygnus, 1600, it was first seen, and then the great conjunction and supernova in Ophiuchus in 1603 to 4. For instance, the British Isles, and England or Britain in particular, was represented by Cassiopeia. And the 1572 supernova marked the start of the Rosicrucian work in England. Moreover, the twin novas of 1592 also appeared in Cassiopeia, signifying that the Gemini spear shakers should appear in England. So there's the British Isles there, the stars of Cassiopeia. Then the nova in Cygnus appeared in 1600, and Cygnus overlights the Appalachians and east coast of North America. So I don't know if you can see clearly, but the yellow lines outline the coast of North America. And in 1606, the Virginia Company was formed. At first subdivided into two subsidiary companies, which were merged as one in 1609, the total land allocated to them in which to establish a colony in North America stretched from the 34th to the 45th parallel. So it takes in all the appellations, in other words. So this more or less corresponded to the main stars of the spine of Cygnus, with the spine of Cygnus more or less corresponding with the appellations. And Oak Island in Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia, I'm pointing to now, lying just half a degree south of the 45th parallel, may well have helped mark the northern limit of the Virginia Company's territory. It was also not far from the earthly location of the star Deneb, the root chakra of Cygnus the Swan. In 1606 was the first charter of the Virginia Company. And at first, the Virginia Company was governed by His Majesty's Council of Virginia, composed of 13 investors who had been appointed by the king and had sworn to serve his interests. But by 1609, the Virginia Company had decided that its arrangements for governance and investment needed an overhaul. So Sir Francis Bacon, the Solicitor General, and Sir Henry Hobart were given the task of drafting the Virginia Company's second Royal Charter, which was signed by the King and issued on the 23rd of May, 1609. And this charter divested the King of some of his power, allowing investors to elect not only a treasurer to lead the company, but also council members, although their choices were still subject to the King's veto, and all members were still required to swear loyalty to the King's interests. This Virginia Council numbered more than 50 persons, including Francis Bacon. In 1612, a third and final Royal Charter, again drafted by Sir Francis Bacon, was issued. This charter transferred the power to elect all officers of the company and the colony, to admit new members to the company, and to draft company and colony laws from the Virginia Council to a General Assembly composed of all investors. And this had the effect of democratizing even further the workings of the company. And this charter of 1612, together with that of 1609, was the beginning of constitutionalism in North America and the germ of the later Constitution of the United States of America. Now, in respect to the Virginia Company, Jamestown was the first colony to be established. So I'm pointing to Jamestown now. Its position was not practically very habitable and presented challenges to the colonists, and the colony's location could have been altered, but wasn't. So why? Well, to establish such places, pre-calculated navigation lines were followed over land and over sea. What turns out to have been the case in this instance was a unique navigation line emanating from Gorhambury, St. Albans, which more or less follows a course in the Milky Way as projected onto the world. The exact navigation line from Gorhambury, St. Albans to Jamestown via Nova Scotia starts off in Gorhambury from Bacon's Mount at an angle of 287 degrees. This line exists as a ley line, which can be dowsed, which I've done. It is also echoed by a 287-degree parallel line from St. Alban's Shrine in St. Alban's Cathedral that passes through the chancel of St. Michael's Church. And this line can be calculated geometrically. And how it was done originally is a moot point. St. Alban's Shrine in St. Alban's Abbey and St. Michael's Church with its chancel certainly existed physically in 1606 when the Virginia Company colonists were told where to go. Bacon's Mountain Observatory was seemingly only built in 1610, but there may have been something on its site pre-1606 when the planning for the journey was being done. The map I'm showing now portrays the geometry that underlies Francis Bacon's layout of Gorhambury Estate. Bacon built his observatory, called Bacon's Mount, on the high ground in Praywood and due east of St. Michael's Church. And directly to the west of Bacon's Mount, and the same distance apart from the mount as the mount is from St. Michael's Church, Bacon built Temple Lodge. The geometry of the land was then laid out as shown on this map. It involves a well-known mathematical way of showing the dimension of the Earth in comparison with the Moon, with the geometry of the Great Pyramid of Giza being key to this. The 287-degree navigation line from Bacon's Mount exists as a ley line, which I first saw clairvoyantly and dowsed on one of my early visits to Gorhambury in the 1970s, and then marked on a map as I thought it was important in some way. But I did not realize the ley line's full significance until a kind friend informed me about the 287-degree navigation line from St. Alban's Shrine to Jamestown that goes via Bacon's memorial statue in St. Michael's Church. And he pointed out that my Bacon's Mount ley line seemed to be parallel to it. So since the discovery, I've been able to discover more and confirm the alignments. And please note that the 287-degree navigation line from St. Alban's Shrine that goes via Bacon's statue in the chancel of St. Michael's Church also goes through a corner of the Solomon's seal that can be drawn in the large earth circle in Gorhambury Estate that Bacon laid out. I'm going to point to this line now, and it goes through the corner of these two triangles that make up Solomon's seal. And that's the ley line I'm pointing to now. Moreover, the line, that is this line, Michael's Church, St. Alban's Abbey line. The line links the shrine memorials of the two saints called St. Alban, the original 3rd century St. Alban and the 17th century Viscount St. Alban. And 287 is the key cipher, or K cipher, of Fra Rosicross. And this Fra Rosicross cipher, 287, was used extensively by the Rosicrucians to cryptically sign many pages of the Shakespeare Folio and other publications. And on a modern Ordnance Survey map, Bacon's Gorhambury geomancy looks like this. The fact that there are two parallel 287-degree navigation lines to Jamestown across the Atlantic continues the Gemini theme, especially as one line was set up by using physical markers and navigational instruments, whilst the other was set up in another way. But this wasn't the only thing or things shown by the 1604 celestial display. Immediately after Francis Bacon died on Easter Day 1626, William Rawley, Bacon's chaplain, secretary and friend, published Bacon's Sylva Sylvarum with New Atlantis appended to it. New Atlantis concerns a utopian island in the Pacific called Ben Salem. Now, Ophiuchus is in the Pacific Ocean. There's Ophiuchus holding the serpent. And the right hand of Ophiuchus, which is here shown as the left hand, where the supernova appeared, corresponds to the position of Ben Salem as described in New Atlantis. It's about there. I calculated this also, without knowing this yet, just from what is described in New Atlantis. Of course, there is no physical island there, but in terms of the British landscape zodiac, there is a place, and that place is Gorhambury at St. Albans. So there's the serpent, there's the hand of Ophiuchus. So that should give us a great deal to think about. Thank you all very much.